Did you know this guitar solo helped create experimental rock as we know it? This guitarist, like so many others, was forgotten and overshadowed by people who made more noise but weren't necessarily better. While magazines kept putting the same faces on their covers, these guys were in the studios, on the road, in the shadows creating the sounds you're still trying to copy on your old guitar without even knowing who was behind them. Today, we're giving them the justice they deserve. Because if rock and roll ever ran through your veins, you owe it to yourself to know these extraordinary guitarists, the history decided to ignore, but who deserve to stand on the same mountaintop as the biggest legends. 12. Allen Collins. When you think of Lynyrd Skynyrd, the first name that probably pops into your head is Ronnie Van Zant. And that's fair, he was the leader, the voice, the soul of the band. But behind that voice was a man with a guitar who created one of the most iconic solos in rock history, a man named Allen Collins. He didn't chase the spotlight, he pretty much avoided it. He preferred staying one step back, letting his instrument do the talking, and man, did it talk. That nearly 5-minute solo in Freebird wasn't rehearsed note for note. It was improvised in the studio, born straight from the soul of a kid from Jacksonville who just let his fingers run free. A little known fact: the song was originally recorded in 1973, and the label thought it was way too long for radio. Allen refused to cut it. He said music doesn't get mutilated to please executives, and he was right. On October 20th, 1977, a plane ran out of fuel over a Mississippi swamp. Allen survived, but his best friend and bandmate Ronnie didn't. What followed was a spiral of pain, alcohol, and personal tragedy. A car accident in 1986 left him paralyzed and took his girlfriend. He passed away 4 years later at 37, with so much music still left in him. His life was full of heartbreak, yet music was always there for him. And every time that solo plays, Allen Collins is still flying free. Before we keep going, we'd love to get to know you a little better. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Let's move on. 11. Alvin Lee. Woodstock, August 1969. 500,000 people in the rain, mud, and the hope of a generation that wanted to change the world. And on that stage stepped a skinny guy with a red Gibson plastered with stickers, who proceeded to play I'm Going Home at a speed that left everyone speechless. Alvin Lee was 24 years old and had just become right in front of everyone, one of the fastest guitarists on the planet. But here's the cruel irony of fate. The same speed that made him famous also became his curse. Critics labeled him as all flash, no feeling, and Alvin carried that unfair cross for the rest of his career. Believe it or not, that Woodstock performance almost didn't happen. 10 years after was scheduled to play during the day, but delays pushed them to 2 in the morning. Alvin was exhausted and wanted to cancel his manager, talked him into going on, and the rest is history. After Woodstock, Alvin deliberately stepped away from the spotlight. He moved to a country house in England, recorded albums almost nobody heard, and cultivated a slower, more emotional blues. He passed away in 2013 in his home, surrounded by his guitars the way he'd lived his whole life. The world barely noticed, but music lovers still mourn his loss today. Hit that like button if you think rock isn't real. Rock without a great guitarist. 10. Rick Nielsen. Cheap Trick was never the kind of band critics took seriously. They were too fun for heavy rock and too loud for pop. Right in the middle of all that was Rick Nielsen, with his 5-neck guitars, backward baseball caps, and that mischievous kid's grin. But underneath that playful exterior was an extraordinary musician. Rick wrote songs that sounded simple on the surface, but hid complex structures between the chords. I Want You to Want Me sounds like a teenage love song, but listen closely and you'll find harmonies that would have made the Beatles smile. A fascinating fact: Rick Nielsen owns more than 2,000 guitars. His collection is one of the largest in the world. His favorite has always been a 1959 Stratocaster he bought used for $300 as a teenager. Cheap Trick's massive success came late in 1978 with the live album recorded in Japan. By then, Rick had been playing bars and small clubs for almost 15 years. Today, he's 75 and still touring, still smiling, still the genius the industry never took seriously. 9. Danny Gatton. They called him the greatest unknown guitarist in the world, and that's both a compliment and a tragedy. Danny Gatton could play anything: country, jazz, blues, rockabilly. He could sound like Chet Atkins one minute and Jimi Hendrix the next, but he never found commercial success. Record labels didn't know how to label him. He was too country for rock, too rock for jazz, and too talented for the established formats. Even the Grammys turned their back. He was nominated in the 90s for his album 88 Elmira Street, but he didn't win. Still, his peers adored him. Les Paul called him a genius. Albert Lee said he was the best he'd ever seen, but the general public never knew his name. Sadly, in October 1994, Danny Gatton took his own life in the garage of his Maryland home. He was only 49, with so much music left to give. He left a note, though his family never revealed what it said. All we have left are his recordings, a testament to a talent the world didn't appreciate in time. 8. Gary Moore. Ireland has given the world many things: poets, writers, rebels, and guitarists who play the blues like their life depends on every note, just like Gary Moore. He started as a teenage prodigy in Belfast during the most violent years of the Northern Ireland conflict. While bombs exploded outside, Gary practiced scales in his bedroom. Music was his refuge, his escape, his salvation. He played with Thin Lizzy, Coliseum 2, hard rock bands that brought him fame but not fulfillment. Then, nearing 40, he recorded Still Got the Blues and showed the world what a true prodigy he was. That song was written thinking of all the losses in his life. His mother had recently passed. His marriage was falling apart. Gary channeled all that pain into a guitar solo that lasts barely 3 minutes, but feels like it contains a whole lifetime of sorrow, a touching detail you probably didn't know. The album sold millions. Critics who'd ignored him for decades suddenly discovered him. Still, Gary never felt comfortable with the late success. He passed away in 2011 from a heart attack in a hotel room in Spain. He was 58, with plenty of music still left in him. Irish blues lost its most authentic voice, and the world lost one of its most beautiful guitars. What's your favorite guitarist? Drop it in the comments. 7. Andrew Latimer. If you've never heard of Camel, don't worry, you're not the only one. This British progressive rock band never got the recognition of Pink Floyd or Genesis. But for those who discovered them, for those who let themselves get carried away by those ethereal melodies and infinite soundscapes, Camel was almost a spiritual experience. And at the center of it all was Andrew Latimer. His guitar didn't scream, it whispered. It created atmospheres that transported you to places you didn't know existed inside yourself. Such was the power of his guitar that in 1975 he released The Snow Goose, an entirely instrumental album. It's based on a short novel by Paul Gallico about a lonely artist and an injured goose. Andrew composed the music without having the book rights. When Gallico found out, he threatened to sue, then listened to the album, was so moved he dropped the charges. That's how big this man's talent was. Andrew never chased fame, maybe that's why he never found it. Today he's still playing, in his 70s, for small, devoted audiences. People who understand that some musical treasures aren't made for the masses, they're made for those who know how to listen. 6. Mick Ronson.
I'm an alligator.
David Bowie was the genius, the chameleon, the artist who redefined 70s rock. But behind every transformation, behind Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, was a man from Yorkshire with dyed blonde hair and a golden Les Paul. Mick Ronson was the arranger, the musical director, the translator who turned Bowie's visions into sonic reality. Without Mick, songs like Moonage, Daydream, or Suffragette City wouldn't sound the way we remember them. He created those immortal riffs, those strings that lifted the songs to another level, and they went down in history. This fact says it all. When Bowie recorded Life on Mars, it was Mick who wrote and performed all the string arrangements. He had no classical training he learned by looking at sheet music and experimenting, and the result was one of the most beautiful arrangements in pop history. After Bowie, Mick worked with Lou Reed, Ian Hunter, Morrissey, always a second in command. Until in 1993, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. He passed away months later at 46. Bowie, devastated, dedicated several songs to him, but the world had already forgotten who was the man who made the stars shine. 5. Ian Berenson. If you're over 50, you've probably heard Ian Berenson's guitar hundreds of times without knowing it. He was the lead guitarist for the Alan Parsons Project for almost 2 decades. Those elegant, precise, emotional solos? All him. Ian was never the center of attention. The project carried Alan Parsons' name, the sound engineer turned producer. Ian was the session guitarist. Nothing more, nothing less, yet the talent was always there. Interesting fact, before joining the Parsons Project, Ian played the famous guitar solo on Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street. That song you heard on the radio without knowing who played it, that melody that stuck in your head for days, that was Ian, always invisible. His style was the opposite of showmanship. Every note had a purpose, nothing extra, nothing missing. He was the perfect guitarist for songwriters who valued the song over ego. Today, Ian is still alive, retired in Scotland, far from the stage. He probably never got the credit he deserved, yet his music keeps playing on radios around the world. 4. Elliot Ingber. This name will probably mean nothing to you. And yet he was there at the birth of 2 of the most influential and strangest bands in rock, the Mothers of Invention and Captain Beefheart. Elliot Ingber was a founding member of the Mothers alongside Frank Zappa. But Frank was a difficult leader, demanding to the point of impossible. Elliot left before the band recorded their first album. Later, he joined Captain Beefheart's Magic Band under the pseudonym Winged Eel Fingerling. He played on Trout Mask Replica, considered by many the most experimental album ever recorded, and when you listen, you understand why. The craziest part, during the recording sessions for that album, The musicians lived for months in a house where Beefheart subjected them to sleep deprivation and psychological manipulation to free them artistically. Elliot lasted longer than most. His later career was erratic solo albums nobody bought, collaborations nobody remembers. Still, his influence on experimental rock is undeniable. He was a pioneer of a sound that still feels ahead of its time today, and yet almost nobody knows who he was. Subscribe to the channel if you want a video on the most underrated drummers in rock. 3. Rory Gallagher. There's a famous photo of Rory Gallagher. He's on stage, drenched in sweat, his beat-up Stratocaster hanging from his neck. The paint on that guitar was so worn from use, you could see the bare wood underneath. Rory never replaced it. He said it was part of him, that it had absorbed his soul over the years. This genius was born in Ireland, grew up in Cork, and brought Irish blues to every corner of the world. He played with an intensity few could match. While other guitarists settled into fame, Rory kept traveling in vans, sleeping in cheap hotels, living for the stage. There's a legend that shows his influence. When someone asked Jimi Hendrix how it felt to be the greatest guitarist in the world, he supposedly replied, "I don't know, ask Rory Gallagher." We don't know if it's myth or truth, but the fact that it's told says a lot about the respect Rory commanded among his peers. His health deteriorated from alcohol. In 1995, he needed a liver transplant and died from post-operative complications at only 47, with so much music still left in him. Ireland lost its most faithful son, and blues lost one of its last true believers. 2. Steve Morse. Imagine winning Guitar Player magazine's Best Rock Guitarist Award 5 years in a row. His dominance was so overwhelming that the magazine had to retire him from the competition to give others a chance. That was Steve Morse, and yet his name rarely appears on the big lists. He started with the Dixie Dregs, a southern progressive rock band that blended country, jazz, and classical music. Then he played with Kansas, replacing Kerry Livgren. And finally, in 1994, he joined Deep Purple, where he still is today. An impressive fact, besides being a great guitarist, Steve Morse is a certified commercial pilot. For years, he alternated his music career with flying commercial flights. He said flying gave him the same sense of freedom as playing guitar. His technique is flawless, but he was never a show-off. He always put the song first, virtuosity second. Maybe that's why the general public never celebrated him the way they should. Maybe that's why teenagers never put his poster on their walls. Ask any professional guitarist, and they'll tell you Steve Morse is one of the greatest who's ever lived. 1. Glen Campbell. And we reach the end of our list with a name that might surprise you. Glen Campbell was known as a country singer, a TV host, a Vegas star. But before all that, he was one of the most in-demand session guitarists in Los Angeles. He was part of the legendary group of musicians known as the Wrecking Crew. He played on records by Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley, the Beach Boys, the Monkees, big names in modern music. When Brian Wilson needed the best guitarist available for the Pet Sound sessions, he called Glen, and Glen showed up immediately. In fact, Glen Campbell temporarily replaced Brian Wilson on the Beach Boys live shows during the 1964 and 65 tours. He played bass and sang harmonies most of the audience never noticed the difference. His solo career overshadowed his session work. But it was his guitar few people credit him for that shaped the sound of the 60s.
not clinging to the rocks tonight.
Glenn passed away in 2017 after a long battle with Alzheimer's. In his final years, he couldn't remember the songs that made him famous. But those who were with him say his fingers still searched for the strings, because for him, music was life. And that's the end of this journey. I'll leave you here with a video of another oldies playlist if you want to keep the nostalgia going. See you next time.